"Get away from me, it's embarrassing," she snapped in public, until I ignored her and another woman pulled me close and... The air in the ballroom was thick and expensive, smelling of cedarwood, French perfume, and the kind of ambitious sweat you only find at corporate galas. My wife, Sarah, navigated the crowd like a sleek, silver fish in a vast, dark ocean, every movement deliberate, every smile a perfectly calculated deflection. We had been married for 5 years, but tonight, standing here at the annual Sterling and Pierce Leadership Mixer, she felt as distant as a star in a forgotten constellation. I, Liam, was merely the satellite, orbiting her established, radiant glow. Sarah. To the world, she was the epitome of success. Poised, sharp, and possessed of a kind of cool, effortless grace that made people lean in and listen. She was the youngest senior partner in her firm's history, a feat that demanded not just brilliance, but an unwavering command over her own narrative. Her hair, the color of polished mahogany, was swept up in a severe but elegant style, a fitting crown for the architect of her own destiny. Her gown tonight was a tailored midnight blue, clinging just enough to suggest power, not vulnerability. She was built for high places, her soul seemingly forged in the same cool steel as the skyscrapers she helped finance. And me. I was Liam. I ran a small, artisanal furniture studio, a career Sarah affectionately referred to as my passion project when introducing me to anyone who mattered. I was happier among the scent of sawdust and fresh varnish, with rough hands and a mind focused on the tangible craft of turning a fallen tree into a lasting legacy. I was her anchor, perhaps, but a heavy, often inconvenient one in her world of floating abstractions and image management. I was a man who yearned for warmth, while she excelled in the cold, clear light of public scrutiny. We were currently stationed near a crystal ice sculpture, a shard of frozen truth in a room full of gilded lies. Sarah was in conversation with Mr. Alastair Finch, the firm's octogenarian founder, a man whose presence could shift market trends. This was not small talk. This was a strategic alliance being forged over lukewarm champagne. I watched Sarah's animated profile, the way she mirrored Finch's subtle gestures, showing engagement without losing her professional edge. A wave of genuine affection, the kind that still felt like a punch to the gut after all these years, swept over me. I missed her. Not the woman beside me, but the girl who used to laugh so hard over burnt toast that she'd cry mascara streaks onto my shirt. Impulsively, foolishly, I took the step. As Finch paused to take a sip of his drink, I moved up behind Sarah, letting my fingers brush the small of her back, a silent, possessive, yet tender claim. A simple, domestic gesture of, "We are a unit." The reaction wasn't a flinch, it was a microscopic shudder that sent a chill straight through my bones. Her eyes didn't leave Finch's face, but her whole body language tightened, becoming an impenetrable fortress. "Darling," she murmured, her voice a low, silvery thread of controlled tension, her smile for Finch never wavering. "Tell me you didn't." I frowned, a dull ache starting behind my eyes. "Didn't what?" "Just supporting my wife, Sarah." "You're crushing this." "You know exactly what," she replied, her voice dropping lower, a whisper coated in iron. She leaned in, as if to tell me a secret, but what she delivered was a verbal guillotine. "Get away from me, Liam. It's embarrassing." The words, though quiet, echoed in the hollow chambers of my chest. They weren't born of shame over the gesture itself, but shame over the sight of it, the public display of something so messy and human as spousal affection. She straightened quickly, turning to me with a staged smile that felt like a neon sign flashing, "Interruption. Mr. Finch, forgive my husband. He just remembered he needs to check on the catering delivery." She threw me a look, sharp as a stiletto heel. "Liam, didn't the caterer call you about the mishap?" The sheer absurdity of the lie, me, the artisan, worrying about catering, was breathtaking. I felt my face flush, not with anger, but with the cold tide of insignificance. "Right," I managed, the word tasting like ash. The mishap. Terribly sorry, Mr. Finch. Please, Sarah, continue." I stepped back, but the ground beneath my feet felt like it had dissolved. Finch nodded, already forgetting I existed, his focus magnetically drawn back to Sarah's strategic brilliance. I walked away slowly, my hands now shoved deep into my pockets, feeling like a misplaced piece of furniture myself, a sturdy, unpolished oak table in a room full of Italian marble. My heart, which had been reaching for her, now retracted like a startled snail, leaving behind a slick trail of emptiness. I found a quiet corner by the bar. I ordered a neat whiskey, wanting the warmth of the alcohol to thaw the ice age that had just descended between us. This wasn't the first time. It was simply the most public, the most definitive. A few months ago, she'd pulled her hand away from mine while we walked into a gallery opening. Her reason then, "Liam, my clients will be here. Holding hands is what we do on the couch, not when networking. It's not professional." It was never about intimacy. It was always about optics. She saw our relationship not as a sanctuary, but as an accessory, a tasteful yet secondary piece of decor. And my attempts at affection. They were rogue scribbles on her meticulously clean canvas. "Tough crowd tonight, huh?" The voice belonged to the bartender, a young man with kind eyes and a tired smile. "Something like that," I muttered, rotating the amber liquid in my glass. "She's a powerhouse, your wife," the bartender commented, wiping the pristine counter. "Everyone here talks about her. Like she's one of those beautiful but deadly orchids. Stunning to look at, impossible to touch." I stared at the whiskey, letting his unintended poetry sink in. Impossible to touch. It was the perfect description. "She's just focused," I heard myself say, defending her out of habit, but the words felt like dust in my mouth. "She has a lot on her plate." "Sure," the bartender said easily, moving on to another patron. I watched Sarah across the room. She was still holding court, her smile a beautiful, distant lighthouse. I realized something profound and chilling. She hadn't given me distance because she was busy. She had demanded it because she was afraid of what our real, imperfect intimacy might cost her social currency. She wanted the title of wife, without the liability of lover. I finished the drink. The whiskey was warm, but it couldn't fill the hollow space. I didn't feel rage. Rage would imply I still had skin in the game. What I felt was the quiet, terrifying calm of withdrawal. I was done trying to bridge the ever-widening chasm. I had reached across for her, and she had severed the rope. Now, I was adrift. I put my empty glass down and began to move, not toward Sarah, but toward the grand exit doors. I wasn't leaving the event, not yet, but I needed air, a break from the gravity of her perfection. I simply needed to find a space where my presence wasn't a conversational mishap. Liam, the man who craved a real, honest connection, was beginning to learn how to exist. Outside her orbit, the distance she had so fiercely created in public was now becoming a permanent fixture in my heart. I was giving her what she wanted, a husband who was invisible, quiet, and far, far away. The silence of that realization was the loudest sound I had heard all night, a chilling foreshadowing of the emotional void I would soon have to confront. I took a deep, shaky breath, the crisp night air a welcome change from the oppressive ballroom musk. This small, solitary retreat was the first time in months I had truly acted without first calculating Sarah's public perception. A tiny, rebellious crack had appeared in the porcelain cage of our marriage, and I didn't know yet if it would lead to freedom or utter collapse. The deep chill from the ballroom had settled into my bones. After my retreat from Sarah's porcelain proximity, I spent the next hour hovering on the periphery of the event, a ghost at my own marriage's party. I perfected the art of looking engaged, a nod here, a half-smile there, all the while ensuring I remained well outside Sarah's carefully drawn radius of professionalism. The small, rebellious crack I'd found near the exit doors widened into a quiet understanding. I didn't owe her emotional visibility anymore. I owed myself peace. The following Friday, I found myself at a different sort of gathering, a multi-firm professional development seminar held in a brightly lit, modern convention center. Sarah was required to attend the morning sessions. I came for the optional afternoon networking reception, hoping to make some contacts for my furniture studio, maybe commission a few pieces for corporate lobbies. The air here was less suffocating than the gala. The ambition was still palpable, but it was seasoned with a bit more genuine curiosity. I was leaning against a sleek glass partition, nursing a sparkling water, when I saw her. Maya. She was not a colleague of Sarah's from the finance division, but rather from the high-energy, creative marketing agency that often collaborated with Sterling and Pierce. She was a burst of unexpected color in a sea of corporate neutrals, wearing a bright saffron blouse that seemed to absorb and radiate the room's energy. Maya had a different kinetic charge than Sarah. Where Sarah was polished steel, Maya was warm, worn leather, comfortable, inviting, and real. I had only exchanged quick greetings with her once at the gala, but she approached me now with an easy, unforced smile. "Liam, right? The furniture magician?" she asked, her voice rich and melodic. "I prefer artisan, but magician has a better ring to it," I replied, feeling a genuine smile bloom on my face for the first time that week. Felt strange, almost forgotten. "I mean it," she insisted, pulling up a nearby high chair. "I looked up your studio. Your cedar tables? They're phenomenal. They have soul. You can tell they were made, not just manufactured." We fell into an effortless conversation. We talked about wood grain and texture, the difference between mass-produced symmetry and the beautiful asymmetry of a handcrafted piece. She shared her own passion for finding the human touch in digital marketing. The difference between our conversation and anything I had with Sarah in public was the complete absence of calculation. With Maya, there was no agenda, no citadels of professional decorum to defend. It was just two people talking about things they cared about. "You know," Maya said, laughing heartily after I described my failed attempt to incorporate sustainable bamboo into a desk design, "you have this great laugh. It sounds exactly like your furniture looks, solid and honest." "Thank you," I said, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the whiskey from the previous week. It was the warmth of being truly seen, outside of Sarah's shadow. As the reception began to thin out, Maya stood to leave. "Well, I need to catch the train before the rush." "It was genuinely great catching up, Liam. Keep making beautiful things." I stood up too. "You too, Maya. You've given me a great idea for a new veneer finish, actually." "Thank you." And then it happened. Without thinking, without the agonizing self-correction I always performed around Sarah, Maya reached out. She didn't offer a stiff handshake. She gave me a quick, firm, genuinely warm two-armed hug. It was the kind of spontaneous, friendly contact that bypasses the brain and goes straight to the soul. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, a simple expression of appreciation, but in the context of my current emotional landscape, it was an earthquake. "See you around, magician," she whispered playfully, giving my shoulder a final, familiar squeeze before turning toward the exit. I stood there for a moment, the echo of her warmth still lingering, feeling slightly dizzy from the rush of uncomplicated human connection. And then, the light dimmed. My peripheral vision caught a familiar figure standing near the entrance to the networking lounge, a woman who had been delayed leaving her final session. Sarah. Her tailored suit, which usually made her look invincible, seemed suddenly rigid. Her smile, the one she reserved for minor associates and inconvenient acquaintances, was pasted onto her face, but her eyes were twin glaciers. She hadn't seen the whole interaction, but she had certainly seen the final, critical moment. The spontaneous, shared laughter, and the intimate, two-armed farewell hug. Her gaze wasn't fixed on Maya. It was fixed on me. There was no confusion or romantic jealousy in that glare. It was pure, unadulterated fury. This was the fury of a queen who had seen a peasant handle her crown jewel. It was the fury of a puppet master whose puppet had performed a spontaneous dance number. My genuine interaction, my authentic smile, and the freely given warmth I received threatened the entire meticulously crafted illusion of my quiet, emotionally docile role. I had received a spark of life in public, and she hadn't authorized it. We drove home in a tension so thick it felt like the car was swimming through mercury. The silence was not peaceful. It was a pressurized chamber waiting to explode. As soon as the garage door clanked shut, sealing us into our ostensibly private space, the dam broke. "What in God's name was that, Liam?" Sarah's voice cracked, not with sadness, but with sharp, brittle anger. I slowly unbuckled my seatbelt. I was calm, terrifyingly so. The warmth from Maya's hug still felt like a shield. "That was a conversation, Sarah," I stated simply, pulling my briefcase from the back seat. "Don't play coy. That touching. That familiarity with Maya. She's not even that important in the grand scheme. You looked ridiculously unprofessional, Liam. Like some love-struck teenager, grasping for attention. She threw her purse onto the passenger seat with a violent thud. Grasping for attention, I repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air. I looked her in the eye, my voice low and steady, a hammer hitting the same nail. It was a hug, Sarah. A very kind, normal, human hug from a person who was genuinely interested in my work. I stepped out of the car, turning to face her fully under the stark fluorescent light of the garage. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of all the small, humiliating rejections. But you're right, I continued, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. It was familiar. It was warm. And I liked it. Her face went from fury to a kind of stunned disbelief. You liked it? Are you implying something? Are you trying to hurt me? No, Sarah. I'm asking you why you're hurting me, I countered, the question a sharp blade. I tried to hold your hand at the gallery. You pulled away. I tried to show you a tiny, simple gesture of affection at your mixer. You told me to get away from you because it was embarrassing and unprofessional. I took a deliberate step toward her, forcing her to hold my gaze. So, tell me, why are you furious now? Why are you mad that a woman gave me a 3-second hug, when you spent 5 years training me to know that affection, in your world, is an embarrassment? I paused, letting the heavy truth sink its roots into the cold concrete floor. You wanted distance, Sarah. You demanded that I keep my affection private, hidden, and certainly not on display for your professional contacts. I respected that. I have pulled back, exactly as you requested. And yet, when a moment of simple, uncomplicated warmth appears in my life, you unleash this tsunami of manufactured rage. Why? Is it because you actually crave my affection? Or is it simply because you cannot stand the thought of losing control over the attention that is implicitly yours? The air crackled between us. Sarah's perfectly composed facade finally cracked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The truth in my words, that her anger was rooted in ego and control, not love or jealousy, was a silent bullet. She was left standing in the harsh, unflattering light of the garage, looking less like a powerful senior partner and more like a little girl who realized her favorite toy was being played with by someone else. The emotional detachment I had cultivated in Chapter 1 had armed me for this moment, giving me the clarity to see through her performance. The earthquake had passed, and the resulting silence was not the silence of peace, but the quiet wreckage of a truth finally spoken. My conversation with Maya was the catalyst. Not for infidelity, but for a desperately needed emotional reckoning. Sarah had finally been forced to look at the true, ugly cost of the perfect, distant image she had forced our marriage to bear. The stage was now set for the difficult, painful realization that would follow. The silence that followed my pronouncements in the garage was a different creature altogether. It wasn't the pressurized silence of impending doom we'd shared earlier. It was the chilling, settled silence of a winter morning after a brutal storm. Sarah didn't argue. She didn't scream or deny. She simply stared, the icy veneer of her composure shattering not with noise, but with an agonizingly slow implosion. I had delivered a truth that was too precise, too cutting for her usual maneuvers. She eventually retrieved her purse with a quiet, jerky movement and walked past me into the house, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm on the marble floor, a sound that usually signified command, but tonight sounded only of retreat. I stayed in the garage for another 10 minutes, leaning against the cool hood of the car, letting the last residual adrenaline dissipate, replacing it with a profound, exhausting quiet of emotional victory. I hadn't won a battle against her. I had won my freedom from the need to fight for her attention. The next few days were marked by what I can only describe as an orchestrated return to wife mode. Sarah, the master strategist, realized her previous tactic had failed catastrophically and was now attempting a complete re-engagement based on the data points I had provided during our confrontation. If I craved warmth, she would generate it. If I missed intimacy, she would schedule it. On Sunday morning, a day usually reserved for her strategic planning or mandatory networking calls, I woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. I found Sarah in the kitchen, dressed in a soft cashmere sweater, not the razor-sharp silk she favored, and actually standing at the stove. "Morning, Liam," she said, turning with a gentle smile. It was the smile of the girl who'd cried over burnt toast, meticulously recreated by the senior partner. I thought a proper breakfast was long overdue. Morning, Sarah, I replied, my voice courteous but distant, like addressing a very polite stranger. That's thoughtful of you. I sat at the counter, watching her. Every gesture was correct. The soft turn of her wrist as she flipped the bacon, the way she slid my mug across the counter. Her fingers brushing mine in a deliberate, lingering touch. It was a flawless performance, yet it felt hollow, like watching a perfectly synchronized machine mimic a heartbeat. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said, she started, carefully arranging the food on my plate. I waited. I felt no anticipation. The man who craved this admission, the Liam of Chapter 1, had taken a permanent vacation. I know I haven't been present, she continued, avoiding the stronger word, loving. The pressure at work has been immense, and I let that bleed into us. I've been rigid, closed off. I let my public face become my private face. She sat down opposite me, leaning her chin on her hand, displaying a pose of contemplative vulnerability. I miss us, Liam. I miss having that easy connection. I miss your easy connection. She reached across the counter and tentatively placed her hand over mine. The touch was soft, warm, and intentional. I didn't pull away, but neither did I return the pressure. My hand felt like marble beneath her touch, cool, smooth, and utterly unresponsive. I saw how comfortable you looked with Maya, she confessed, her voice dipping to a confessional timbre. And it stung. Not because I think you're, but because I realized I was so focused on building my castle walls that I forgot you were locked outside. I'm scared, Liam. I'm scared of losing you. I listened patiently, dissecting her words like a forensic scientist. I let my public face become my private face. I miss your easy connection. I'm scared of losing you. Every sentence was technically an apology, yet the underlying current was crystal clear. Her actions were motivated by a fear of loss. The loss of her husband, yes, but more keenly, the loss of her control and the painful public implication that she, the flawless Sarah, could fail at the one thing that still defined her socially, a stable marriage. Her regret was an ego injury dressed in the fine silk of self-reflection. I appreciate the honesty, Sarah, I said finally, gently withdrawing my hand to pick up my fork. And I believe you are scared. I looked up, meeting her hopeful gaze with my own flat, empty eyes. But I don't believe that fear is driving you to find the real us. I think that fear is driving you to fix the problem. The hope in her expression dimmed, replaced by the familiar tension. What do you mean? I'm trying to fix things, Liam. Isn't that what you wanted? No, I sighed, pushing the perfectly cooked bacon around my plate. What I wanted was a wife who, when I reached for her hand, didn't recoil from me as if I were a public relations disaster. What I wanted was a spontaneous hug, not one that was scheduled after a strategic planning session. What I wanted was a love that was a sanctuary, not a showpiece. I put the fork down. The attention you're giving me now, Sarah, it's not driven by genuine affection. It's driven by the sudden, panicked realization that you might lose a valuable asset. You're repairing a crack in your foundation before the whole structure falls down. And I can feel the difference. I leaned back, resting my arms behind my head, adopting a posture of total disengagement. You wanted distance, Sarah. You wanted a husband who was quiet, invisible, and who wouldn't embarrass you in public. You've successfully cultivated that distance. It's here now, not just in the ballroom, but in me. My heart felt like a dormant volcano. It wasn't erupting with anger, just existing, covered in a thick layer of ash. I was no longer angry. I was simply free. Free from the desperate need to win her back. Free from the humiliation of the public snubs. The pain had cauterized itself, leaving behind a smooth, terrifying numbness. But I'm trying to change, she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge, finally showing genuine, raw emotion. The fear that I was slipping entirely out of her grasp. Give me a chance. I can be better. I can be the woman you need. You are the woman you need to be, Sarah, I corrected her gently. A brilliant, driven, guarded woman who prioritizes her shield over her heart. And that's fine. But I can't be the man who perpetually waits for her to lower it. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You created the distance. I just accepted it. And now, that distance is the truth of our relationship. It's not something I feel angry about anymore. It's just the weather. I walked toward the door, turning back for a moment. She was still sitting there, the abandoned breakfast plate a lonely monument to her failed strategy. You have the distance you always desired, Sarah, I concluded softly. And now it's mine too. I left the kitchen, heading to my studio where the honest, rough grain of wood waited, a reality I could touch, feel, and shape. I wasn't running away. I was just returning to the place where I wasn't an embarrassing mishap. The quiet finality of the realization was both mournful and liberating. The stage was set for the final unexpected act, her full reckoning, which would determine if this emotional gulf could ever be bridged. My exit from the kitchen felt less like a dramatic walkout and more like the quiet closing of a heavy door. I didn't slam it. I simply let it click shut on the hollow performance Sarah had staged. The detachment I described in Chapter 3 was my shield, a necessary armor against the recycled affection she was trying to administer. I spent the afternoon in my studio, working on a commissioned walnut desk, losing myself in the rhythm of sanding and the honest scent of the timber. Wood doesn't lie. Its grain tells its story truthfully, unlike the carefully curated narrative Sarah lived by. When I finally returned to the main house in the late evening, the silence was total. I found Sarah not in the living room or her home office, but in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed. She wasn't dressed in professional attire or even the soft sweater from the morning. She was wearing an old, faded university sweatshirt of mine, something she hadn't touched since our college days, a garment completely devoid of professional context. Her hair, usually a disciplined mahogany sculpture, was loose and messy around her shoulders. She looked smaller, and for the first time in years, completely unprepared. I didn't try to make dinner, she said softly, her voice flat. I knew it would just feel like another strategy. I nodded, acknowledging the truth without offering comfort. I placed my phone on the bedside table. Good. I began to undress slowly, moving through the motions of routine. I was emotionally conserving my energy, aware that the last conversation had merely been the tremor. The real earthquake was still waiting. You called it an ego injury, she whispered, her hands tightly clutching the edge of the mattress. And you were right. This morning, I wasn't scared of losing you, Liam. I was terrified of losing the proof that I could have it all. She finally looked up, and her eyes were not the twin glaciers I knew. They were red-rimmed, wet, and utterly exposed, stripped of their defensive glare. I know I messed up, she continued, her voice gaining a rough, painful edge. But I need you to understand why I built the walls so high. It's not about professional image. That's just the camouflage. It's about being safe. She took a shaky breath, and the next words were wrenched out of her, genuine and unedited. My whole life, I've had to be perfect to survive. When I was a kid, if I brought home a B, my mother would withdraw. Completely. No anger, just cold silence. It taught me that genuine connection, the warmth, the love, is conditional. It's a prize you only get if your performance is flawless. If you let anyone see you need something, they'll use it against you. She paused, and the dam finally broke. Tears began to stream down her face, but she didn't try to wipe them away. This was the first time I had seen her cry, truly cry, in probably a decade. When I reached senior partner, the stakes felt impossible, she confessed, her voice thick with pain. I thought if I let myself be vulnerable with you, if I let myself need your touch, need your support, it would expose a weakness. If I showed the world that my happiness was tied to the soft, messy thing that is love, they could take it away. They could hurt you to get to me. So I pushed you away. I demanded distance. To keep you safe from the conditional, cold world I live in. Her eyes locked onto mine, pleading, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. I chose the porcelain cage for us because I thought it was the strongest possible protection. I never stopped loving you, Liam. I just convinced myself that the safest way to love you was to make you an untouchable statue in my perfect public garden. Her confession was a torrent of painful honesty, washing away the last vestiges of my emotional armor. I realized her coldness hadn't been contempt. It had been a desperate, misguided attempt at preservation. She wasn't just afraid of losing control over me. She was afraid of the sheer, terrifying vulnerability that comes with real, unconditional love. I sat down beside her, the mattress sinking slightly. My hands still felt cold, but the ice around my heart was beginning to melt, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache of empathy. "Sarah," I said quietly, "the problem is, you built a cage so strong it cut me off. Your protection felt like rejection. You gave me the distance you desired, and I almost let that distance become permanent because it was less painful than constantly being told I was an embarrassment." "I know," she whispered, burying her face in her hands. "When I saw you with Maya, laughing, receiving that hug, it wasn't jealousy of another woman. It was a crippling fear that you were finally realizing you could find real warmth outside the walls I'd built. That I'd ruined the very thing I was trying to protect." I gently reached out and touched her shoulder. The old college sweatshirt was soft beneath my fingers. This time, when I touched her, she didn't flinch or recoil. She leaned into it, seeking the contact. "I can't promise to instantly forgive the years of coldness," I admitted, my voice husky. "The detachment I built up is a strong mechanism. It will take time to dismantle." "I don't need your instant forgiveness," she said, lifting her face, her eyes clearer now. "I need you to give me a chance to learn how to be vulnerable. To learn that it's okay for the world to see the messy truth. I need to learn that if I fail at work, or if things aren't perfect, you won't withdraw. You won't leave." "I won't leave," I promised, the commitment feeling heavy and real. "I never intended to leave. But you have to lower the shield, Sarah. Completely. No more calculated smiles. No more strategic touches. No more apologies that are actually thinly veiled demands for control. When you reach for me, it has to be because you need me, not because you need to fix a PR problem." "I need you," she said, the words simple and direct, devoid of any corporate pretense. It was the most honest sentence she had spoken to me in years. I need my anchor. I finally allowed myself to hug her, pulling her close. Her body was still rigid with the aftershock of her confession, but she clung to me with a desperate strength I hadn't felt since we were teenagers. The embrace was clumsy, imperfect, and messy, everything our public life wasn't. It felt real. The truth had cracked the porcelain cage, leaving behind sharp, dangerous edges. We weren't magically fixed. The emotional gulf was still vast, but Sarah had finally, truly, built a bridge across it with her confession. "We start now," I said against her hair. "We leave the perfection for the office. Here, we're just Liam and Sarah. Messy, sometimes scared, and always irrevocably real." She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine. A faint, genuine smile, one that reached her eyes, without the slightest hint of strategy, appeared. "Okay," she whispered. "Just Liam and Sarah." The ending wasn't a fairy tale where all our problems dissolved in a flash of light. It was the hard-won beginning of something new. We had navigated the waters of ego, distance, and fear, finding our way back to the simple, profound commitment that had started it all. The journey to heal the detachment was just beginning, but we were finally walking it side by side, no longer afraid of the messy, beautiful reality of being truly connected. Sarah had found the greatest armor wasn't a shield of cold perfection, but the warm, honest touch of the man she loved.